समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The film Satluj was released on Z5 and then pulled within 48 hours. However, the fact that it's been pulled has made it a bigger story. It's being seen more than would have been the case otherwise. It's been available to whoever wants to see it. And now it's been politicized fully, and Akali Dal has decided, Shiromani Akali Dal, Sukhbir Badal's party, that they are going to show it in every part of the state, in every village, to show, quote unquote, the excesses and inhuman activities of the Congress government or the police under the Congress governments in Punjab during those years. So this has now become a full-fledged story. What happens in these cases is a film is a film. A film is not a documentary. A movie is not a documentary. And a movie also takes a period or gives you a very digested, shortened version of what happened. Think of Zero Dark 30, for example, film on Osama bin Laden's killing. A film also often gives you its own understanding. The filmmaker gives you their own understanding of a particular situation or a development. That is why it becomes that much more important to understand the perspective. Now, to understand where this film is coming from or the central character there, Jaswant Singh Khalra, who headed Shiromani Akali Dal's Human Rights Cell and who Diljit Dosanjh plays in this film. He is the protagonist. There is zero doubt that he was kidnapped by the police, not arrested, kidnapped by the police, say around 5th or 6th of September 1995. That was within 5 days. That came in the wake of something, because you might think that by 1995, terrorism was over in Punjab. In fact, sometimes in 1994, terrorism was over in Punjab, and fatalities of all three categories, that is, civilians, terrorists, and police, had declined to almost nothing. I will give you figures as we go along. By 1995, it was almost zero. So how come this action took place? There were two reasons for that. One was that Khalda was now running a campaign to collect details from cremation grounds, only from some cremation grounds, particularly Patti, Majitha, and Taran. These are generally in the old Amritsar district area. Now these have become multiple districts. At that point, there was also an innovation, because Mr. KPS Gill had created what was called police districts. So police districts only had an SSP or SP who was in charge of the district, and the police pretty much controlled those districts. These were the worst terrorism/militancy affected districts in Punjab. The civilian magistracy had minimal control or minimal say in these districts. He was collecting data of cremation of unidentified bodies from these police stations and then extrapolating it to say that so many must have been illegally killed and cremated anonymously or as unidentified bodies, basically taking these cremation grounds and multiplying them by the number of more prominent cremation grounds in the state. Khalda and his researchers or investigators, they collected data from 3 municipal crematoria in Amritsar, Majitha, and Taran in the same general region, which was also the hotbed of militancy in that era. That number that they added up was 2059 unidentified bodies brought by the police to be cremated. Then they multiplied this by the number of other prominent crematoria in the state and arrived at the number of 25,000. Finally, when National Human Rights Commission was sent to investigate. They were given a list of 2,097 such unidentified bodies having been cremated. NHRC then concluded that they could establish that 109 of these had died in police custody. Now, the police might have said that some were sick or some tried to escape or whatever, but they said, look, we are not fixing any culpability, but we are saying that since 109 of these died in police custody, vicariously the state is responsible and the state must pay their families compensation. So that was ordered and that was paid. Why does this date, September 5, 6, become important? First of all, the police were irritated with him because he was running this campaign and he was going to courts, and they thought that this will lead some of them into trouble or many of them into trouble. But the second thing is, August 31 was the suicide bomber attack on Chief Minister Beant Singh. Now, people talk about KPS Gill, that he fought terrorism in Punjab, but he would not have been able to do it but for Beant Singh, who was the Chief Minister. Beant Singh became Chief Minister after the election in 1992. He was a very powerful Chief Minister in the Congress Party. In the pantheon of the Congress Party, he ranks quite high, even in his death. In fact, his grandson was a Congress leader, Ravneet Singh Bittu. He then left the Congress Party, is now a prominent member of the BJP, was a Minister of State until recently at the center, is now back, probably preparing to contest the state elections or lead some section of the party there, because BJP now has high expectations in Punjab. Because BJP now has high expectations in Punjab, the one state where it hasn't mattered, it's not been quite as immaterial there as, say, in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, but quite a bit. In the past, it got power there in partnership with the Shiromani Akali Dal. Then, when it contested by itself, it got almost nothing. They are now hoping that they will make an impact there, at least establish a sizable foothold in the state. And one of the leaders who's going to be helping them do that is the grandson of the same Sardar Beant Singh. So I lost my way a little bit. Within 5 days of Beant Singh's assassination, the police were angry, looks like, and they picked up Jaswant Singh Khalra. Now, he was picked up the same night his wife Paramjit Kaur prepared a habeas corpus petition. By 9th of September, she had filed her habeas corpus petition in Supreme Court of India. Before that, however, on 6th of September, Gurcharan Singh Tora, who was a formidable Akali leader and also the boss of Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, as if forever, for a very long time, he had sent a telegram to Justice Kuldeep Singh, who was an eminent judge of Supreme Court of India. Justice Kuldeep Singh said the next day that this telegram is being accepted, this cable is being accepted as a habeas corpus, and then the petition also came from Paramjit Kaur. The two were combined, and then the court ordered the CBI to hold an inquiry. The CBI submitted a report a few months later, and then the investigation and the trial process started. By 2007, all the trial process had been gone through. A special CBI court tried the officers who were charged in this case, and 8 were convicted and handed life imprisonments. That was by 2007. That was confirmed by the Supreme Court of India. That was the bench of Justice P. Sadashivam and Justice B.S. Chauhan. So once again, zero doubt that Jaswant Singh Khalra was picked up, not arrested, picked up illegally. He was beaten up, tortured, his body was thrown into a canal. CBI then later put all the evidence together, and that's how these convictions took place. The first story in national media, the first break on how he was killed, how he was kidnapped, tortured and killed, eyewitness account, that was broken by the Indian Express on 6th of May 1996 by Satinder Bains, the Amritsar correspondent then. Kanwar Sandhu then was the resident editor of Indian Express in Chandigarh. As to who the editor of the paper was, you might want to Google. Now, what am I trying to do? You will, in the course of time, have a full episode of our very popular feature, Past Forward. We will reconstruct the entire Khalda story. wait for that. It'll take a couple of days, requires a lot of research, lot of archival digging also. That will take time. What I'm going to do is to take you back to that time, to help us understand where this situation had arisen from, because nothing happens in a vacuum. This was at the tail end of terrorism slash militancy slash insurgency in Punjab, which was quite nasty at its peak. Its peak was 1990, 1991. Those were the days I was traveling in Punjab often and covering it from the ground. So I will take you back to a lot of my experiences and travels from that period to tell you what the situation was. I will also draw from the work of some colleagues of mine, particularly Kamar Sandhu, who used to be our correspondent. I used to then work for India Today. He used to be our correspondent in Chandigarh, covering Punjab. On a couple of these stories, he and I also have joint bylines. I will also refer to this book, this Turmoil in Punjab, Before and After Blue Star, an insider story by Rameshinder Singh, a former IAS officer. This is the best book by far that's been written on the crisis decade of Punjab, decade plus of Punjab. The best in the sense that most factual, the best archived, the best documented, also the most dispassionate and not at all politicized. This is as clinically accurate, honest and brutal as a book can be, particularly when written by somebody who belongs to that state and who has served in that state as a senior government official. Rameshinder Singh was the Deputy Commissioner of Amritsar when Operation Blue Star took place. I interacted with him at that time. He kept on rising. In the course of time, he became the Chief Secretary of Punjab and retired. Much after that, he wrote this book. And for this book, we owe him a debt of gratitude, because for a lot of things I want to check back on, I just have to go to the index of this book, or I have to find the right pages, see it so dog-eared and so underlined by me, or I just look at the readings in the book. So I will also give you some references from this book. Now I take you back. What was the worst year in Punjab? People think of 1984, that is Operation Blue Star. Operation Blue Star is when one thing happened, and we remember that, for that big operation. Books have been written about that. Even this book, Rameshinder Singh's book, also has a great deal of detail there, some of which I did not know, although I had stayed back in Amritsar to cover Operation Blue Star. 2 other Indian journalists had stayed on there. All the others, everybody had been told to leave by the army and the police. 3 of us decided to stay on. One of them is still around, that is Brahma Chalani, besides me, of course. Subhash Kirpekar, the third one from the Times of India, is no more. Now, look at the numbers in Punjab. If you go back to the numbers, you can go back to 1981 when the first terror attacks took place. But let's not go that far. We can start, say, with 1987, because 1987, KPS Gill has not yet taken over in Punjab. KPS Gill was from Assam cadre. He had been brought into Punjab to help, but he only became DGP of Punjab in 1988. I will give you the dates. Let's start with 1987. 1987, 910 civilians were killed, 95 security forces personnel were killed, and 328 terrorists were killed. Then it goes up. 1988, this is when Rajiv Gandhi is becoming weaker, the government is becoming weaker. 1988, 1949 civilians, 110 security personnel, and 373 terrorists. 1988, when things have gone this wrong, KPS Gill is brought in as DG of police, and looks like there's been some impact. 1989, civilians killed 1168, security forces personnel killed 201. So one number went down by about 60%. That is the civilians' deaths came down by 60%. The other one of security forces nearly doubled. That's because probably combat was joined now, the fight was joined, and terrorists were 703. 1990, things got really bad. They started turning bad, then they got worse and worse. What happened in 1990? 1990 is when, towards the end of 1989, India got the only government, the only prime minister, and I've said this often enough, the only prime minister who was weak on national security. That was VP Singh. VP Singh's innings, mercifully, was short-lived. He started out by appointing Mufti Muhammad Saeed as his home minister, who started his innings as home minister of India, seeing his daughter Rubaya Saeed kidnapped by separatists in Kashmir. The government immediately made a deal with separatists to get his daughter freed. Now, can you imagine the kind of start a government gets, the government of India, when it sees its home minister's daughter kidnapped and makes a deal with militants, terrorists, insurgents? Those definitions kept changing over time, makes a deal with them and releases a lot of people to get its home minister's daughter out. Now, what faith will anybody have in this government? Because the home minister is supposed to look after the security and law and order all over the country. Every citizen believes that their safety is in the hands of the home minister of India. In this case, the home minister of India had his cabinet, his government make a deal to get his own daughter out of the kidnappers' hands. Now, this gave the worst possible beginning to the VP Singh government, and also because the Akali Dal was supporting them. In the course of time, things began to get really worse in Punjab. Things got worse in Punjab in 1990. 2,467 civilians were killed, so the number more than doubled. 476 security forces personnel were killed, and 1,320 terrorists were killed, which means Punjab was really a battle zone. And then what happened? KPS Gill was still the DGP of Punjab, but by this time there were demands from the Akalis to get him out. So his wings were clipped. By the end of 1990, he was removed. When was he removed? He was removed when Chandrasekhar became Prime Minister of India. VP Singh's government fell. Chandrasekhar always believed in negotiation. He thought he will negotiate with terrorists/militants in Punjab and bring about some kind of a peace. Their first demand was that Gill should be removed. That's when Gill was removed. It was in that winter, say in December of 1990, that I made a long tour of duty in Punjab, just documenting how bad the situation had become. I was accompanied by Prashant Panjiyar, the photographer, who was my fellow traveler on many such assignments. So I do remember it was a really cold winter in December in Khemkaran. Khemkaran, remember, when we think of Khemkaran, we think of the Battle of Khemkaran in 1965 war. This is where the graveyard of Pakistani pattern tanks was created, border village. So we reached there really early morning, maybe 6 o'clock or 6:30, maybe 7. You could see some signs of sunrise. The idea was those days to get out as early as possible. But the idea was to get out as early as possible so you can also get back as early as possible, or not later than you really had to, because those days everybody knew that after sunset, militants controlled everything. All of us who traveled in Punjab those days suffered both the humiliation and the fear, because it wasn't a nice feeling, and the fear of being stopped by armed militants on the highways and being asked to explain our identities. If they were convinced, once they were convinced you were journalists and not from Punjab but from outside, they usually let you go. I'd say there is honor among thieves, but in the course of time that stopped. I will tell you that story also. So we got to Khemkaran early morning. Also tagging along with us was Robert Nicholsberg, who was then working for Time magazine, world-renowned photographer. His book, which is a collection of his pictures from Jammu and Kashmir, that is coming out. In fact, he had asked me if I'll write a chapter for it. I apologized and said no, simply because of the fact that I did not cover that story from the ground. So I didn't think I was qualified to write a chapter for that book. But watch out for that book. He's a very renowned photographer. And we remembered that morning in Khemkaran, we were starving. We had come early from the hotel in Amritsar, and we were looking for something to eat. And there was one paratha cart that started business first. The guy came and lit the fire and started frying parathas, and all of us ordered. He also had a big platter of dahi, as you would find in rural India, and it was it had a black covering. That black covering was nothing but flies. And to date, I pull Robert Nicholsberg's leg by reminding him that he ate that dahi. None of us dared to do so. That's a joke. The rest of the day was not a joke, because then we traveled in the most difficult parts of the state, as we did over the next many days, and got an idea of where the state had come, how dire the situation was. Because in Punjab, as I told you, you try to, even as a journalist, hardened journalists like us who had seen much violence and death, even we were scared of sundown, because after sundown, it was dark silence everywhere, because only the diktat of the militants ran in those places. You go to rural India anywhere, not now, 20 years back, 30 years back, 40 years back, after sunset, say 7:30, 8, you would hear sounds of radios, TV, when TV was available, something. Our villages don't go dead after sunset. In Punjab, it was just like that. The radios were quiet. It was also the era of two-in-ones, ones that had a radio and a cassette player. All of them were quiet because the terror groups had decreed all music to be illegal, decadent, blasphemous. This was exactly the same kind of injunctions that you get from the Taliban in Afghanistan today. Even the dogs were quiet in Punjab at that point of time. Many dogs had been shot. I know dog lovers will be triggered when I say so today. And many had been poisoned. And many had been poisoned by their own owners. Why? Because militants had said, kill all your dogs. Because militants were concerned that when they moved at night, dogs being dogs would bark. And villages are full of dogs. So they asked people to kill their dogs, so militants' presence will not be given away. And everybody knew that if armed militants were going past your streets, and if your dog barked or growled, they might just shoot you instead. They will not shoot the dog. Maybe they will shoot the dog also, but they will also shoot you, because they will blame you for still keeping the dog, because they had told you to kill your dogs. Nobody had any idea what they will do. And it was the fear. It was the fear that had frozen Punjab completely. This was a resignation. The state was caught in a sense of resignation that you would never imagine in Punjab. This was the rule of the gun. That's why even the story we wrote was headlined Rule of the Gun. This was December 1990, and the account I wrote was published in the issue of 15 January 1991. And we had then noted that there is no government, there are no institutions, there is only two things that function. One was the police, the other terrorists. Both had violence on their minds, and both were armed to the teeth. Between the two, it was also true that the only ones who could promise you peace were not the police, they were terrorists. But before that, you had to surrender to them, you had to make peace with them. That's why militants would come calling at night, sometimes through the main door if they thought there was no police around, sometimes scaling your wall, sometimes using a ladder to do so, or getting onto your roof. If they did so, you did not shout for help, you just went out and cooked for them. When they sent you a note to pay what is called as Daswant. Daswant is the traditional Sikh religious offering. Just as in Islam there is zakat, which is a part of your income which you are supposed to pay for society. In the Sikh system, 1/10 of your income is to be paid to the community. If terrorists asked you to pay Daswant, you paid. And then these are things that the current generations would identify with the Taliban. The terror groups at that point went after education. They wanted to enforce new curricula in schools. No school was allowed to play or sing any national anthem. No Jan Gan Man. Hindi language was banned. All school uniforms, skirts were banned, trousers were banned, frocks were banned for women. If you didn't follow them, then people with guns will come and sort you out, quote unquote. We use the example of Nirbal Kanta, who was the headmistress of a government school at Rajpura. near Patiala, not far from Chandigarh, say about 45 minutes from Chandigarh. This was a government school. Her kids were poor. She just said, give me a few weeks before my girls could change from frocks to salwar kameez. They have to get them stitched. Their parents have to get the money. Meanwhile, they are coming wearing skirts, but I will make sure that they get salwar kameez soon. She kept on arguing that her students, the girls, came from really poor factory workers' families. Rajpura is an industrial area. There are lots of small industries there. For just arguing with them, she got 2 bullets into her belly. The Taliban had not been invented yet. Taliban had not come up, and Talibanization was not an idea on anybody's mind. But what happened in Punjab then would be called the equivalent of Talibanization today. My university, Punjab University campus, very cosmopolitan, very fashionable. See how many film stars have come from there, how many glamour people have come from there. They were given the code of conduct. Women were not supposed to wear jeans, only salwar kameez, no sarees, no jeans, no skirts, no dresses. Everybody, this was directed almost entirely at women. Everybody had to wear a salwar kameez with full sleeves, no pants, no cutting your hair, no plucking your eyebrows, no lipstick, no bindi. And if you thought this wasn't serious, if you defied them, then you were slapped. You suffered different kinds of punishment. You could be slapped. One case I know, the young woman had her jeans torn. Another who had 2 plaits, 2 chutias, had 1 cut, and one wearing a salwar, but a salwar made of fabric which was seen to be not thick enough, not opaque enough, or maybe semi-transparent. She was grabbed and escorted, taken to a ready-made shop and given money to buy a proper opaque salwar. But you know what? Some people would still fight back. And as you would expect, it'll have to be some women. So there was one particular woman whose name I will not tell you. I did not even publish it then, who said, I will keep wearing my jeans. I'm retaliating by wearing my jeans. They want Khalistan, they can take it. What have my jeans got to do with their Khalistan? So there were a few people like that, but they also took enormous risk. Now I'm telling you these stories as a journalist, and I feel scared that we went through. In fact, I am scared even thinking about what we had gone through at that point. Maybe because we were almost 40 years younger, and also there was adrenaline. We didn't quite feel that way. But journalists were exposed to danger in multiple ways. I will tell you one particular story. I've given you the perils of being on the hit list, of not carrying out the militants' orders. But the other idea was the media guys that both the police, intelligence agencies and the militants used, and that destroyed the credibility of real journalists, because either the police or the terrorists could suspect you of being an agent. There's one particular case that I recorded, and that was the case of a very educated, smart girl called Jasmeet Kaur. And she was sent posing as a journalist of a Delhi-based Hindi magazine to lure out a left activist. Left activist. In fact, the least told story of Punjab militancy is that the leftist activists in the villages of Punjab are in the forefront of the fight against them. This was Hardev Singh Babbu, a leftist worker from sizable village Harsha China near Amritsar. Manjeet Singh Babbu had escaped 3 attempts on his life already. He was charmed by the journalist who had come to interview him on behalf of a Hindi magazine in Delhi, and she said, "Will you come to Jammu? I want to do a story on the Kashmir problem." So he agreed to go with her. Next day, a day later, his cut head was found on the gate of his village community center, just hung there ceremonially, like a warning to everybody. His trunk, the rest of his body, was never found. And that's why after sunset, when strange people with AK-47s stopped your car on the highway and said, "Tusi kaun ho? Who are you?" And you'd say, "Hum journalist hain, asi patrakar hain," and showed them your cards, you weren't quite sure what they were thinking, and they weren't quite sure who you were, because both sides used the ruse of using journalists. I gave you the example of education and schools. So teachers were being taught the new language of militancy. Journalists were the more significant target. This was cultural change that the terrorists wanted. The second was just the change in the messaging. So all of us were told that we cannot call terrorists terrorists. We have to call them militants. Maybe they'll tolerate that, or khadkus, or Khalistani Mujahideen. That is also something that came up. Every militant's name had to be prefixed with a Bhai or Sardar, and if they were dead, it had to be Shaheed. Doordarshan was told to stop broadcasting in Hindi. Even on Chitrahar, Doordarshan stations that telecast Chitrahar in Punjab, they had to put subtitles in Punjabi. Now, to understand how serious this was or how dire this was, I have to read a few paras from Rameshandar Singh's book. So, he's talking about these new practices. And I read from his book, this is page 408. In new practice, spashtikarans or explanations surfaced. The print media would print these spashtikarans of citizens threatened by the militants for alleged misdemeanors or violations of the code of conduct enforced by them. The threatened individuals and organizations would explain their conduct or seek militants' forgiveness by placing advertisements in newspapers. The media became a mode of communication between the terrorists and the terrorized. It suited the militants who got publicity and the newspapers which earned revenue from advertisements. This was almost like the media earning blood money by publishing apologies and explanations from people who had been put on the hit list by terrorists. Then he goes on to explain how the media was also forced to publish the announcements for free of the bhog ceremonies of every dead terrorist who they had to call militant or khadku. Even the Tribune, it says, otherwise a neutral English daily, also respected Indian daily, when they declined to carry a bhog advertisement of an A category terrorist, two gun-wielding men walked into the office of its editor-in-chief, V.N. Narayanan, on 14th of June 1990 and threatened him. The Tribune capitulated. The terrorists' edicts, codes of conduct, bhog obituaries, bandh calls, warnings, and spashtikarans became a regular feature in newspapers. And then he says the media capitulation was complete when Jinda Sukha. Now, Jinda and Sukha were the two assassins of General Vaidya. General Vaidya was Chief of Army Staff when Operation Blue Star took place. After retirement, he was living in Pune, and one afternoon he was driving in his tiny Maruti 800 with one police gunman when Jinda and Sukha went up there and shot him and the gunman and the driver. That story I covered also as an India Today cover story much later. However, these two wrote a 21-page note explaining where they were coming from, why they were doing what they were doing, and what their ideology and what their beliefs were. This was their own defense. And militants told all of the media in Punjab to carry this 21-letter explanation. What does Rameshandar Singh tell us? He says the media capitulation was complete, but Jinda Sukha, the two assassins of Vaidya, and I told you a little bit of description of that assassination. General Vaidya issued a 21-page letter to the newspapers with a directive to publish the full text of his bullets. You and I in PTI circulated the letter on 26 July 1990 in full, and many newspapers, including national dailies, carried its extracts. In Chandigarh, he says, Punjabi Tribune carried the entire text of the letter covering about 3 pages, 3 full broadsheet pages, while its sister publication, the Tribune and Dainik Tribune in Hindi, published only an abridged version. Narayanan, the editor-in-chief of the Tribune, still had 14 June fresh in his mind when two armed militants with AK-47s. Can you imagine the fear that an editor might face when people walk in with AK-47s and say, are you publishing this or not? He still had that fear in his mind. So when he received fresh threats, he fell in line and published the entire text of the 21-page letter on July 28, 1990. The Dainik Tribune, the Hindi paper, which had continued to defy the warning, also succumbed on 30th July and published the entire letter with an apology on its front page for the delay in publishing it. I will have Rameshinder Singh tell more of this story. On 22nd November 1990, the Panthik Committee under Sohan Singh issued an elaborate code of conduct with a threat to inflict memorable punishment on journalists who violated it. The code prohibited the media from using the term terrorists. A succession of other codes followed. On 1 December 1990, the Panthik Committee issued the language code that enforced the use of Punjabi in the state. Any non-compliance was punished by the militants. I am reading this out to you so we understand how did we reach the situation that we reached by 92, 93, 94, 95. By 93, terrorism was more or less over. In 94, it was fully over. But I am bringing back to you the worst phase of that campaign. So once again, from Rameshinder Singh's book, and this chapter is called The Fourth Estate, page 410, any non-compliance was punished by the militants. On 6th December 1990, A.K. Talib, the handicapped station director of All India Radio, who was home on leave for his daughter's marriage, was shot dead, not using Punjabi everywhere, daring to use Hindi here and there. Later, one Harminder Singh Happy, a terrorist, was arrested by Gurdaspur police and he confessed to the murder. The police wanted his confessional statement to be captured on camera to telecast it, but the Doordarshan camera crew did not dare to turn up. M.L. Machanda, station director of All India Radio at Patiala, was next to be killed. Terrified, the radio station complied with the militant edict and discontinued its Hindi news bulletin and shifted its Hindi broadcasts to the Rohtak station in Haryana. Suddenly, the Doordarshan women announcers started wearing salwar kameez, covering their heads with dupattas, and spoke in chaste Punjabi. Then he goes on to say how the journalists were attacked. I'm taking time, but it's important to understand that the history did not begin yesterday or begin with Google. There was history before Google. What's affected, he says, was the Hind Samachar group of newspapers. They also have Punjab Kesari. On 18 July 1990, the van carrying its newspapers to Firozpur was ambushed near Jagrao and all its 5 occupants, including 3 police cars, were killed. Its editorial staffers Inderjeet Sood, news editor Band Singh, chief sub-editor, 2 reporters Jagjit Singh and Parduman Singh, and its vendors, agents and hawkers, numbering about 44, were killed. These included the founder Lala Jagat Narayan and his son Ramesh Chandar. Such was the fear that the state government, under President's rule, announced they were not going to give any ads to Hindi newspapers. That's when in the Press Relations Committee, Rameshinder Singh notes, somebody, a member of the committee, said, Khalistan aa gaya hai, taunting the governor. Governor then tried to blame a civil servant and get away with it. Rameshinder Singh also tells us of how officers stopped giving any typed notes in English. They replaced their English typewriters with Gurmukhi typewriters. And then he concludes, strange as it may appear, most of the codes and edicts issued in the name of Panthik committees and well-known militants were in fact the handiwork of overground intellectuals sitting in cities like Chandigarh. These notes were usually hand-delivered to newspaper offices and very often to journalists' homes as well. And a press council report later noted what newsmen found particularly disturbing would be scarcely veiled threats to their wives and children, whose names, ages, schools, and classes might sometimes be mentioned to suggest that their movements were known. This was also a period when government was actually run by these groups. Your deputy commissioner could do nothing for you, or if deputy commissioner was not doing anything for you, you just went to the militant linked to your village and your stuff will get done. Your land dispute was stuck in a court. There were Khalsa courts that will give you quote unquote justice instantly. And if somebody did not follow their orders, you can imagine what would follow. At that point, the average lifespan of a militant/terrorist was 3 years. Later, it became much less. In fact, KPS Gill used to say that militancy in Punjab will die, terrorism will die, when the lifespan or survivance, as they call, of an A category terrorist, because terrorists were put in categories A, B, C like that, the lifespan of an A category terrorist becomes less than 6 months. At that point, militancy, terrorism will die, because people will then start worrying that there is no percentage in this. At this point, by end 1990, 1991, that was the peak of terrorism militancy in Punjab. At that point, they were still living long enough. Many were escaping to Pakistan as well. So there was a sanctuary. There was no shortage of recruits at that point. In fact, even if a terrorist was killed, 3 more will come up, because it was also very profitable to pick up the gun, because you could enjoy the power. If you wanted to make money, you could make a lot of money. KPS Gill, who had then been removed when he was outgoing from Punjab in his first innings, he was removed in 1990 by Chandrasekhar, as I told you earlier. He had told me then, what is it that makes these people terrorists? Love of a good gun, a good fight, and abhorrence of surrender, because they like to fight. It is that sense of defiance that we also sensed in villages in Punjab when we traveled. I remember quoting a man called Kartar Singh at the bhog of Keval Singh, who was a prominent militant, then killed just a couple of days earlier in village Duhal Kohona on the border. He said, do you know about Mir Manu, the Muslim governor of Lahore who massacred the Sikhs? You know what we Sikhs used to say? Manu sadi datri, asa manu de soe, jojo manu varda, asa du savai hoe. Loosely translated, Manu is the sickle that chops us, and we are grateful to him because we are his crop, we are his harvest. We are grateful to him because the faster he chops us, the faster we multiply. And that is how this crisis peaked in 1991, and 1991 became the worst year in Punjab's history. Government changed in Delhi. Chandrasekhar's government went out. His peacemaking did not work out. Narasimha Rao took over in the summer that year. Meanwhile, Rajiv Gandhi had been assassinated by LTTE. In November that year, he brought in KPS Gill. Almost all of the prominent militants in this period got killed in the course of time. They got killed, they got caught. Very few got caught and tried. The only ones who survived from that period are the ones who went to Pakistan. One of them, Paramjit Singh Panjwad of Khalistan Commando Force, was killed on 6th of May 2023. It's a story that we are more familiar with because it's more recent. He was killed by 2 unidentified gunmen on a motorcycle. His bodyguard was injured. A few more still live on in Pakistan. All the rest are gone. In the course of time, maybe tomorrow, maybe in a few days, but in the course of time, I will also give you a more detailed story of how this fight with terror against terror was rejoined towards the end of 1991, and what methods were used to put it down. How come so dramatically by 1993, late 1993, terror was over in Punjab? Once again, I will take you back to the basic figures in conclusion. Again, to give the numbers some perspective, unidentified bodies are routinely brought to crematoriums all across India. In 2011, for example, all across India, 37,193 bodies were brought unidentified for cremation by the police forces across the country. 2014, the number was 35,215. Of these 35,215, 966 were in Punjab. This is long after insurgency, militancy, terrorism in Punjab ended. So 2014, 966 in Punjab, 35,000 nationally. 2011, 37,193 nationally, of which 1,004 in Punjab, long after militancy or violence had ended. In that year, for example, out of the 37,193 nationally, Delhi itself saw 2,748 unidentified bodies brought for cremation. Maharashtra topped the country with 6,313. If you take the number of civilians killed, the peak was 1991, 2,591. That had come on top of 2,467 in 1990. 1992, 1,518. 1993, 48. And 1994, 2. That is how dramatically terrorism ended. How it ended is a story that we'll tell you on another day.